Remember, you are stronger than you think. Don't believe me? We're about to prove it. Welcome back. This is Jen Lee, creator and host of I Need Blue podcast, True Crime to True Life. As a survivor of armed robbery and abduction, I understand the trauma and triggers survivors experience. Knowing this, and through my powerful podcast, I offer survivors a safe place to share their lived experiences. Survivors need blue to feel they belong, they are loved, understood, and my favorite, empowered. Please note, I Need Blue does contain sensitive topics which could be triggering. Please seek help if needed, and remember, you always come first. I Need Blue episodes can be found on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and many listening platforms, including my website, www.ineedblue.net. There, you will find all the episodes, valuable resources, safety tips, my newly released book and ebook, Why I Survived by Jennifer Lee. And if your passion is to learn to podcast, you will find a Learn to Podcast PDF available as well. I would like to thank Sha Good, the talented violinist who composed and performed this opening music. You can find information about Sha Good on my website. As always, thank you for listening. Let's begin today's episode. How many of you have people in your circle whom you jump at a chance to spend time with? These friends leave you feeling optimistic and excited about life, its adventures and obstacles, making you realize you are not alone. As the bond tightens, the connection is slowly revealed. I don't believe in coincidences, and when I met Sha Sparks, I knew I needed to get to know her. We met at a coffee shop, each of us with two-toned hair, our need to be creative already visible. We shared some experiences and how they influenced us to become podcast hosts and authors. Like many, Sha has experienced many adverse life events, and during coffee, she shared her experience of surviving domestic violence. She is prepared to share with us today. Remember, there is always something more significant than the details of our story. The challenges overcome are where the real strength is discovered. She and I often discuss our comfort zones and how challenging them leads to growth. We can't wait to share that message with you today. Sha Sparks is the CEO of Sparks of Fire International. She is a certified fearless living coach and a fearless communicator. She is an author, speaker, and host of the Power of Investing in People podcast. Sha is my friend. We each grabbed a cup of coffee and look forward to sharing with you today. Speaking of sharing, we encourage you to share this podcast with one person. There is healing in sharing. Sha, my friend, welcome to the I Need Blue podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I am truly honored, and I love when we get together and share coffee or stories or, just laugh because, we do that.
Absolutely, we do. We just took a little road trip over to the other side of the state for a podcast meeting, and we absolutely loved that. The energy is just strong and fun when podcasters get together. No matter what topic we talk about, there's this understanding of honoring free speech and people's opinions and learning from each other. So that was great.
Yeah, it was.
Okay, so as I noted in the introduction, one of the first conversations you and I had with each other is we are both survivors of domestic violence. That is the first story that I share in my book, Why I Survived. Today, we wanted to talk a little bit about your situation, because domestic violence happens way too often.
Absolutely, it does. So I was in an abusive relationship for 12 years, and it was mental, emotional, physical, and financial abuse. And the word that I use to describe it is toxic manipulation, until the buzzword of narcissism and gaslighting was around. Now I really understand that that's what I was dealing with, was more of the gaslighting and the narcissist. So everything that I went through, it was for a reason. And I'll share what that reason in a little bit. And if you want me to go into more detail of the relationship, I can.
Yeah, that would be great. Sharing the lived experience is important if you're comfortable.
Of course.
Because I find that when people kind of hear examples of the behaviors of things that were said, then it makes them stop and realize, oh, wait a second, maybe that was me. Maybe that's my sister. So yes, please.
So we were together, and about year 4, I believe. It's so hard to tell because it was so long ago. We were living together, and I get a message on the answering machine, because that's how long ago it was. We had answering machines. And the message was from a woman saying that she was married to my boyfriend and had 2 children with him. And I was blown away. I was like, what? And then she said, and if you don't believe me, you can ask his sister. And the gut-wrenching feel that you feel when you hear disturbing news like that, and the betrayal, is undescribable. But it is as if someone had kicked me in the stomach and I lost all of my air to breathe. In that moment, I had no idea really how to process that, or even to ask, because I know that I learned at this point that I had to be careful of the things that I said to him. I was walking on eggshells, again, is a term I know now, because something might set him off and make him, get in my face and scream and yell at me, or push me and try to choke me and that type of things.
Because that's what had happened in the past.
Right. That's what happened in the previous years. And that's how it started. One of the things I've learned from this situation, I'll say, is that it never starts out like the movies. Like, you watch the movie and the person might punch them and then they're blacked out and they got bruises all over it. That is not how my relationship happens, nor is it how most relationships happen. Most relationships happen is they test you on how they can manipulate you and connive you and things like that. So the first thing he started to do was really lie to me, obviously, because now I find out about the wife and the children. So lying was a huge thing. And they start out with little lies, like in the beginning, he started out lying about his age, started out lying about where he worked, started about lying about his car. He had borrowed his sister's car every time that we went out, and he had told me it was his car. Again, it's like, why would you lie about that? And it's not about that that's the big deal. It's that what he's doing is testing you to see what else he can get away with.
Right. So before all of the lying, when you realized that all of the lies were there, did you have traditionally that honeymoon stage that some relationships have?
I think so. We had opposite schedules. So I worked during the day and he worked overnight. And so Wednesday evening and Saturday evening were his days off, evenings off. So we did what we did. We partied. So we would go out on Wednesday nights. There was always normally a ladies' night or something going on at a bar or a club somewhere. So we would always go out and go dancing and have a great time. And then the same thing with the Saturday nights. And this went on for probably 6 months, I would say. And then I got the feeling, oh no, I called one Saturday night to his place where he was staying, to his house. And this, again, was back in beeper days. And I had paged him and he didn't call me back. So I called him, his house, and he answers the phone and it sounds like there's a party going on. And he didn't tell me. Now we're together for 6 months. You would think that, you would be invited, right? And there's someone in the background that says, "Is that your girlfriend?" And I immediately was like, poof, like every jealousy thing and red flag went off inside of me. And I was like, oh no, we're not doing this. And I went over there to catch him, quote unquote, and he wasn't there. No one was there. It was completely silent. And I went, okay, I know I didn't make that up. I know that just happened. And I, at the time, had also sold him a car that he promised he was going to pay me. And it had been at least 2 weeks at this point that he was going to get paid and pay me. And he hadn't paid me. I was like, okay, so what can I do about this? And I still had the title because he was paying me. He had the keys, but I called a locksmith and had keys made, and I took the car back. And I ended up selling it to someone else. Now, I literally thought in that moment, something's not right. I need to do something, and I need to exit quickly. And so a friend of mine, I was talking to her about it, and she's like, you can come live with me. And so I literally packed up my little apartment in one day and moved to her house. And then I think it was like a day or two later, I took the car. That was my red flag that I should have stayed with and should have listened to that. And instead, 6 months go by and I don't hear from him. I don't see him. Literally everything that he knew of me was gone. I even had changed jobs. And looking back, I'm really think, okay, had I just instinctively knew that I needed to do all that? Probably, because it wasn't a plan. It just literally just all kind of fell into place. And so then a friend of mine called me, and then we saw each other. We saw each other like every weekend. And she's like, you're never going to believe who I ran into. And I'm like, who? And she told me. She said his name, and my heart dropped. And she's like, he asked about you. He misses you so much. He was tearing up when he was asking me about you and all of this. And I was like, really? And I shouldn't have listened, but my gut told me don't listen, but my heart took over and was like, he asked about me? Oh my gosh, he said he missed me? He teared up, really? Like, I can't believe he teared up. Maybe he's changed, was what I kept thinking. Maybe he's changed. And she's like, yeah, he gave me his number to give to you, so you might want to call him. And it took me a few weeks, and I finally called him, and we talked. And he was all of a sudden that really sweet guy that I fell in love with in the beginning. Was, he was kind, he was soft-spoken, he was sweet, he was nice and complimentary, and, the I miss you so much, I love you, and I didn't tell you enough, I didn't do all the things, and admit, transparency, vulnerable, he admitted all the things he did wrong, I'll do better. And I was like, wow, yes, this is what I wanted. This is what I was waiting for. I didn't actually think it was going to happen, but I guess it happened. So here we are. And so then we started seeing each other again and taking it slow. And about a couple of months in, I might not have been a couple of months, it might have been a month, he's like, I have something to tell you. And I was like, okay. And what? And he's like, well, while you were gone, I met someone else and she's pregnant with my baby. And I know that you're going to be the best stepmom ever. So I just want to let you know that this is happening. Like, this is on the way. And finally, you and I are going to be a family. And even if it's part-time, we'll have the kid part-time and we'll be a family. And I was like, again, kind of felt like I was kicked in the gut. And yet I went, well, I've always said I probably couldn't have children, so why not be a stepmom? I mean, that idea kind of resonates with me. Okay, I could do that part-time. Okay, so I thought I was a pretty independent person, so I don't know about children. I hadn't had children before. And so I was like, well, I could do that. And then several months go by and we're just doing the same thing we had done before, going out on the weekends and partying and all of that and having a great time. And then the baby is born, and he calls me from the hospital and said, the baby is here. Can't you come see him? So I go to the hospital and I see the baby and see him in the nursery area. And part of me was kind of hoping it wouldn't look like him. Not that you can really tell by a baby, a whole lot. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But I was like thinking it might not be his. And I just had this like really icky feeling. And again, I didn't listen to it. Icky feeling like here I am at a hospital that I'm not allowed, quote unquote, to go see him and her, but I'm looking at this baby. And so then I leave, and a few days later, we were talking about it, and he's like, oh my God, I can't wait for you to meet the baby. We should maybe move in together. And so we started looking for apartments, and then that few months after the baby was born, we moved in together for the first time. Yeah.
And how long had you been together at this point total from when you first met?
Well, so we were together for 6 months, and we had broken up for 6 months. And by this time we were probably back together about probably 6 months. And we started looking, and then we found a place and we moved in September. So about 9 months, because it was from January to September. So we moved in and everything was great. And then one day, I don't even know what happened. All of a sudden he pushed me. And I thought, why is he pushing me? And I have 2 older brothers, and so I was always taught that if someone pushes you, you push back. And so I pushed back, and he was not very tall and on the thinner side. And so to look at him, you think he doesn't have any strength. But when adrenaline kicks in, he has the strength of 10 people. And so it was as if I was poking a bear every time I would fight back. And it would kick off that adrenaline. And all of a sudden this strength out of nowhere came. So then I pushed him back, and then that got him even madder. And he came back and pushed me down in a recliner. We flipped the recliner over on its back, and he's on top of me and he's trying to choke me. And I'm thinking to myself, like, what did I do? What happened? What's going on here? But it was more about, what did I do? What did I say? What did I not do? And of course, part of it is he's yelling and screaming at me that it's my fault. That if I had whatever, again, it's been so long ago, I don't remember words exactly, but it was just so foreign to me. And yet I had this unbelievable guilt that was going on. And so this went on a regular basis. The police were called. Our landlord was actually a detective for the police department. And he sweet-talked the landlord into saying, the guy below, there's no insulation here. He'd heard us walking around. And he basically, got out of it. He said, I don't know why. He called the police. And he threatened me, of course, if you talk to him and tell him what really happened. He said, I'm going to kill you. And I'm going to come to your job, and I'm going to kill them, and, I'm going to get your family and all the things. And I was like, you're threatening me? And then it became so often that I started to believe him, that he could really do it, could really come kill me, could really come kill my family and things like that. So jump ahead now, here we're year 4, and I get this phone call. I don't even know what I'm going to do. What am I going to do? And so I knew I had to carefully plan, because if he was going to kill me, then I didn't want him to find me. So I decided to move in with my dad. I talked to my dad, and he lived about an hour away. I didn't tell my dad what happened. I just told him I needed to move out. But I didn't change jobs, which I probably should have, but I didn't. So I move out one day while he's at work, and the next day he calls me probably 100 times. And the next day, I think it was over the weekend. And so on Tuesday, because I work Tuesday through Saturday, on Tuesday, he shows up at my work. And at this time, he's working days, so he shows up at my work. And he's like, comes to my work, and he's like, I need to talk to you. And I'm like, I'm busy. Why are you here? And I was kind of a manager of a salon at the time in a mall. And he's like, well, it's mall property. I can be here, blah, blah, blah. And I had never replaced a restraining order or anything like that. But I was like, don't come to my place of business. He's like, well, technically, this is the mall. I can come shopping if I want. And I just want to see you. Like, how could you leave like that? And I'm so sorry. And here we go again. I'm so sorry. And I said, well, you are married. And he said, oh, that's such a mistake. That's not what it looks like. I only got married because of my son, to see him and things like that. I'm not with her. I'm with you. And I said, and she tells me that you have another kid. And he's like, oh, she's lying. She's just trying to break us up. You know, all the lies that you can imagine that you really have no idea which is true or not, right? After months, and I mean months, probably 3 or 4 months of him randomly showing up at work, telling me this, I caved. And I was like, okay, let's get back together. But we're never living together. We're not living together until you figure this out. And so we lived separately for the rest of our relationship. And it got to the point where he had a job, he didn't have a job, he begged me for money. He said he'd pay me back, he never did, things like that. He was an alcoholic, I realized, because at one point during the first 4 years, he had one of our nights out drinking, we came home and he said to me, you do really stupid things when you drink. And now, of course, look, hindsight is always 20/20. I realize, oh, he's talking about himself. He's the one who does stupid things when he drinks. Got it. But I was thinking, oh my God, do I? So that morning, I decided that I would quit drinking because I realized that someone had to be sober. And so I never drank again. And coming from a teenage alcoholic, that was a big deal. So now here we are, we're living separately. And for the next, I couldn't tell you, many years, there were times where he would choke me, I would choke him back. I never called the police. There were times where he would have his arms around my throat and I would have my hand in his mouth, ripping up his creases of his mouth open. He had his thumbs in my eyes. I had my thumbs in his eyes. While he's on top of me, I was just trying to do anything to get back at him. If he was going to hurt me, I was going to hurt him. Then the makeup of, I love you so much, blah, 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 blah. And then the flip side might be 24 hours, might be an hour later, might be 3 months later. It was never consistent, like a woman having her menstrual cycle. It wasn't like once a month type thing. I literally could never have found a pattern in what would trigger him. And then he, one day, held a gun to my head. And I just said, pull the trigger. I don't want this anymore. Pull the trigger. I'm done. I was dead serious. And he chickened out. He didn't pull the trigger. And thank God he didn't pull the trigger. Thank God he chickened out. And yet that's when I knew that when I would hurt him back, there was a point where my conscious kid had kicked in and said, I don't want to hurt him anymore. And I don't necessarily know if his conscious kicked in a longer time later, or if he didn't have that consciousness about himself. I don't know. And then it got to the point where every day after work, it was the same routine. Like, he wanted beer and cigarettes, and I would get them, go to his house. And for the first hour, he would cuss me out and accuse me of cheating with every male client that came into the salon. And I used to just sit there and cry. I felt horrible. And then something inside me clicked one day and I was like, you know what? F you. You're right. I am sleeping with everybody that comes in the salon. Yep, sure am. Yeah. And we're all surrounded by windows. So you can only imagine the people that come watch. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Just things like that where I was done, like emotionally dead inside, numb. I thought, I'm just waiting for him to kill me at this point. Then his aunt and uncle came for a visit. And so right before his aunt and uncle tell me this, I was at home. I was on the couch and I'm on the phone with him. I'm like, you know what? I'm done. I can't do this anymore. You're killing me, literally. I can't do this anymore. And he starts crying, and I hear this voice as if there's another person sitting next to me on the couch saying, in my right ear saying, not now, not now. And at the time, I really thought it was my fear. Like my fear is telling me to not do it because, it's been a long time since I've been alone. And we're in the car and he's getting gas. They are telling me how his mom took him aside from his other siblings and abused him. Not his twin brother and not his older brother and sister, but just him. And the things that they told me, that I was like, you're kidding me. And they're like, oh no, it's awful. And I go, well, she's not very nice to him now, but I didn't know why. I just thought because he does lie. So I thought, well, maybe she's just got tired of his lying all these years. And then after they left, he started to tell me at night what his mom would do to him. She would beat him with anything that wasn't nailed down. She would lock him in his room, and then I'll feed the other kids, and then he was able to come down and eat whatever was left over on their plate while she was cleaning up the kitchen and telling him how much she hated him, how much she wished she'd never been born. He was so ugly and things like that. And I thought, wow, you say the same things to me. Huh. And right after this, his older brother died. And then he became so distraught with grief that he was suicidal, telling me he's going to commit suicide and I'm the only thing that's keeping him alive and blah, blah, blah. So this went on then for a couple of years. But then when he became suicidal, I thought it was my quote unquote duty, my responsibility to make sure that he lived, to make sure that he survived. And he was on his best behavior for probably 9 months. At this time, I think they were still married, but they weren't living together. They weren't together. I was with him every day. Literally with him every day. I spent the night all the time because, again, he's on suicidal watch. I'm trying to make sure that he doesn't do anything stupid, all the things, right? And he was so sweet and so kind for those 9 months. And then a switch flipped. And he pushed me onto the ground. He worked in a factory at this point, and has his steel toe boots on, and he's stomping on my legs. And I have had bruises of his shoe print on my thighs. And I am reaching up. He had his table set as if it was on display. And I would reach up and grab the dishes off the table, and I was throwing at him and hitting him over the head with it to get him to stop. That was the last time that he physically touched me. And then it was about another year later, I think. It's such a blur now, but another year later, I got to the point where I'm like, I'm not coming back. I'll see you after work, but I'm not coming back. I'm done. Again, just waiting for him to kill me. And then he was in a car accident. And he was on his way to my house at 4 a.m. I believe he had been out drinking. He may have cheated on me again, or whatever had happened. And this was the day he was going to try to kill me. And God stopped him. He had hit the tree in the yard of the church that I've been going to. And he had done it in a way with the police report. It's like, it looks unfathomable that he actually did this, but he slid sideways, backwards over a curb in probably 20 feet into a tree where the driver's side was, wrapped his car around the tree. And he had to be cut out with jaws of life. He was in ICU, had a brain injury. And that's where I found him about 13 hours later. And I had to track him down. His mom was trying to get me to file a missing persons report. And then when we got to the hospital, his mom and his sister were trying to get me to take responsibility. And yet they were calling me an enabler because here I was giving him all this money and enabling him and making sure he wasn't going to commit suicide and paying just child support, like all these things. And I just remember thinking, how did I get here? How did this happen? And here I was thinking I was being the person that God wanted me to be. and doing things that he wanted me to do. And yet I just had destroyed my own life so bad, my own self-worth so bad, that I literally was just waiting for him to kill me, and I didn't even know what was next. So then, as I'm driving home from the hospital, I am on the street. I lived on the same street as my church where he had the accident. It hit me just like a snap that, oh, got it. Not now means I have to hand him back to his family. Got it, because they don't know the truth, because he's a compulsive liar, and I don't even know what the truth is. I only know certain things. So, got it. That's what not now means. And so that's what ended up happening. So he went from ICU to a long-term care facility to a nursing home. And over the course of several months, I started Christian counseling immediately. I will say this. I never called the police, even though I probably could have and should have many times. I didn't, because I fought back and thought I could go to jail, that he has marks on him too. Rather than thinking if I went to jail I would be safe, I thought, well, if he goes to jail, he's going to get out and come kill me. He's going to track me down and find me. Because at this point now, I had a business, had a salon, and I wasn't about to give that up or move, just because in my mind, some guy is coming after me to kill me. So I wasn't going to change that. So I think I was protecting him, because that's what often victims do, is protect the abusers. And at the same time, I felt like I was protecting myself, because I thought, well, I don't want to have to change this. I want to have to change my life, because he's the screw up, right? He's the abuser. He's the one that hurts me. I don't want to change who I am. So I never called the police. However, it didn't even say the word abuse until I went to Christian counseling during that first week. And I told the counselor, I said, he's choked me and held a gun to my head and pushed me and scratched me and everything but punched me. And he said, he abused you. I said, abuse? He said, yeah, you were abused. And I said, I was abused. And for me to say that out loud was like a foreign language to me. I think I had grown up with the expectation that being the only girl, you were treated like one of the boys, and that you grow a tough skin and you grow tough and you just be independent and tough, and you're never a victim of anything. Because some things happened to me in childhood that, was never taken seriously. One of my brother's friends attempted to rape me. And when I tell my mom this, she's like, oh, you had your first kiss. And so I realized that a victim doesn't really get their voice heard. Doesn't really get to be a victim. So as I was sitting in the counselor's office saying, I was abused, it was so bizarre to me. And then right after that, I met my best friend for lunch, and I'll never forget, we were sitting in a restaurant and in a corner, and I asked, please put me in a corner far away from everyone, because I was so raw and still crying. And I said to her, I was abused. And I whispered it, because I couldn't even say it out loud. And she said, you were abused? And you never told me. I said, I never told anyone. Until now. And that in itself became the multitude of healings. But just by being able to get my voice back, was taking my power back. And really being able to say, I don't deserve this. I was abused. I was a victim. And I'm going to use this to help others.
That's an amazing story. And as you tell it, I can hear the raw, honest vulnerability in your voice. And over, when you're in a relationship, you question yourself, like, what am I doing? What am I doing? It's like we know that something isn't right, but they know how to manipulate us. And as you say, toxic manipulation, and bring us back in. Now, when you had gotten the call from his wife, and, she said, I'm his wife, you can ask his sister. Had you met the sister? Had you met relatives?
I met everyone. I had met every one of his family members, his aunt and uncle, his siblings, cousins, and he had a dad's side of the family and a mom's side of the family. And at this point, I even met the dad's side of the family. And they were just two separate, totally, different types of people. Like his mom's side was inner city, scarcity mindset, where his dad's side of the family was suburbs and more like abundant mindset. And they all had college degrees, where the mom's side did not. I knew secrets kind of on both sides, but I didn't really grasp the magnitude until, again, after you're out of it and can really see it. What I realized is that his mom also, I call it a double life. So he had a double life. And at some point before his accident, I can't remember when, but at some point he did get divorced. It was finalized. He did have divorce. He did have shared custody of his kids. And yet I still never met them. But looking at his family, his mom had a boyfriend who was married. So she had a double life. And then his dad had cheated on his wife with his mom and kept him and his twin brother a secret from this man's wife the entire lifetime. And he had a double life. So I don't know if it's genetically or if you want to say it was a generational curse, but definitely he had all of this trauma stacked against him.
Right. And we're certainly not justifying his behavior.
No.
But when you have childhood trauma that is undiagnosed, untreated, or you choose not to deal with it and get help and heal, the cycles tend to continue. Many people, they use the word, I wanted to break the cycle. When they grow up in an alcoholic home or whatever it is, when they get to a point where they recognize this is toxic, I don't want to be this way, I'm going to change. But for him, that did not happen.
No, his mom was an alcoholic too, and he became an alcoholic, and he never once, it wasn't until, I think that was 9 years even in to the relationship when he started to tell me about the abuse from his mom. Like, I didn't know any of that. It was because his aunt and uncle were honest and they were there. So then I started counseling. I started to go through my healing, peeling away the layers of the onion that I am. His sister was still trying to get me to get legal guardianship of him. And I was like, absolutely not. I've been trying to break him up with him for years. So I'm handing him back to you. Like, I'm breaking up with you so you can let him know if and when he ever comes out of this. And, I made a plan with my counselor, like how I want to, quote unquote, wean myself off of seeing him, because I had this tremendous amount of guilt, which I know now is survival's guilt. But I had this tremendous amount of grief and guilt and worry and concern still for him, even though he had done all those things to me, because now he's incapacitated in a coma and his eyes were the only thing that were, quote unquote, alive. And I learned through this healing journey that when this happens, so hopefully your audience will hear this loud and clear. When typical dynamics change in a relationship, meaning there is a man and a woman, typically, So I'm only speaking to that because I only know that. So I don't know about same sex. So bear with me if that's your case. So if a man is not the provider as a stereotypical way, and the woman becomes the provider financially, and then the man becomes the aggressor, manipulator, but then has this side that is extremely vulnerable, then the woman no longer becomes the quote unquote wife in the relationship or girlfriend, the partner. She becomes the mother. And so then the partner becomes child. So the fear that I realized I had during that healing portion of why I needed to wean off of going to see him, is because I had a fear of abandonment myself. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to abandon him. And that's what happens when you have these stereotypical roles flipped. And so because I became then the parent and he was the child, even though I didn't have children, I knew that I could never abandon a child. And my heart and my brain were literally feeling like that he was my child. And so it took lots of support, lots of conscious conversations with that support, and really figuring out what it was I was feeling, which I had never talked about or was vulnerable with ever in my life until that moment. But really being able to dig through that and say, I'm a fear of abandonment. So I want to make sure no one else feels abandoned. And that's why I had stayed and walked and did all the things that I did. And the same with his children. I didn't want them to feel abandoned as well. So about 3 months in, they moved him from a long-term care facility to a nursing home. And I had been going less and less and less. And once he moved, I said, no, that's it. I'm not going anymore. And his sister begged me. She called me and begged me to go. Please, please, please go. I said, why? She said, I just feel like you need to see him. She told me, and by the way, he's only communicating by blinking his eyes. And so I go and I get there and he's laying in his hospital bed in the nursing home in a very small room, so small that he had a twin bed and he was sharing it with a twin bed, but they weren't side by side. They were perpendicular. There was no one else in there. It was just him. And the TV was on to Cops. I'll never forget, because he loved that TV show. I don't know why. He should have been arrested, but he left that TV show. Maybe he was learning something, how to get out of it. I don't know. Anyway, that was on and he was snoring. So I thought, okay, he's asleep. And so I just stood there for a minute and watched the Cops, thinking about, what do I do? How long do I stay? Do I leave a note? Why do I leave a note? I'm done. Like, this is all the things I have to process. What am I feeling? Am I grieving? Am I relief? Like, what is this? And all of a sudden the snoring stopped and I looked over and he was just staring at me. His eyes open, wide open. And if you've ever heard that, people sometimes gone before they're actually dead, he was gone. The life wasn't in his eyes anymore. And so I said, can you hear me? Blink your eyes. And he blinked his eyes a whole lot. And I said, do you know who I am? And he didn't blink his eyes. And I repeated the questions, got the same results. And I said, goodbye. And I turned and walked out. And of course I'm crying. And as I opened the nursing home doors, the sun was shining on my face. And all of a sudden I felt this eerie feeling of relief and grief at the same time. And knew that I was making the best decision for me. And he was in a nursing home for 13 years in a wheelchair, and he just passed away last year. Yeah.
As you share the story today, How do you feel? What emotions go through you? And this ended how many years ago?
2009. So 14 years ago.
14 years ago.
Yeah.
So 14 years later, as you share this story, what do you feel? What is going through your mind?
It's interesting because I started to use that term like I was abused, and I would always feel a little bit of vulnerability, but a little bit of embarrassment. And then there were people who would give me some backlash about it, and I had to defend why I stayed because I got well, you're smarter than that. You're too pretty to be abused. Like, why did you stay in that relationship? So what I feel today when I talk about it, it's like a movie that I had watched once that I'm recalling. That's how I feel, that I'm recalling the details of a movie. It's so completely removed from me that I don't have any emotions in it. I don't have any feelings in it. There are times when I'm talking about it, I get a thought of, oh, right, I had a completely different life many years ago. Or I was such a different person back then. I'm not who I am now. Like, it just blows me away sometimes that, like, wow, how far I've come, how far I've healed is what I feel, and that's what I think. Nothing about him. In fact, when I got a text that he had passed away this last summer, and sharing it with my brother, who knows all the story, his first reaction was, how do you feel? And I said, I don't feel anything. I didn't have a reaction in my body at all. I'm very self-aware now, very self-attuned, and there was not even a deep breath when I read that. And I was like, wow, it is literally a movie that I once watched, and I have the privilege of honoring who I was back then and being able to honor all the healing that I've done now.
That's not a word I hear often, honor. Can you describe what honor means to you?
Yeah, and I'll share this even more about honor, because there's more to that about the honor of my healing. So honor is about really loving yourself so much that it becomes your duty to heal. So just like it was my duty to take care of him when he was suicidal, it is now my duty to make sure that I peel away all those layers. It's hard and icky and horrible and tearful they are to look at. It is important. It is imperative. It is life-giving that I heal. And the reason is when you honor yourself, you automatically give permission to the people around you to honor themselves. And I will tell you, and I am a person that always tries to find the happy ending in things. And even though his life was unfortunate, I forgave him long ago. And that's why I'm able to talk about his past, because hurt people because they're hurting. And I, on the opposite side of that, empower people because they're become empowered through healing. And over my journey process, I remained friends and cordial with the dad's side of the family. They would periodically, I would see them. I would travel and I would go see them if I was in their city. And I said, his brother asked me how he was doing. And I said, honestly, I cut all ties after his accident. I said, but I've been thinking about connecting you to his ex-wife, and maybe then that way you can be informed, because I am not informed. And he says, what? He was married? And I said, yeah, he wasn't very logical or rational. And And he was married the whole time we were together, or most of the time we were together. And he said, huh, runs in the family. And then a couple of months later, I reach out to his ex-wife on Facebook. I meet with her, meet his daughter for the first time, who's now 20. I answered any question that she had and explained to them the trauma and everything. And she explained to me that I was the other woman. And I explained to her that I thought she was the other woman. And I said, because I was with him every day, I knew everyone. I said, unfortunately, no one ever told me about you guys, which tells me a lot about his family too, right? His dad's side of the family didn't know, as you just heard, but his mom's side did. I said, I'm here because I really want to connect you with the dad's side of the family. And she was like, you know the dad's side of the family? And I'm like, yes, because we were in a relationship. So I was able to connect the daughter to the dad's side of the family. They got to meet. And then a year later, she introduced the twin brother to the dad's side of the family, which is his half brother. And they met for the first time in 54 years. And I am in awe of how I'm a very spiritual person. So how God worked through me to heal, so that when he said to me, not now, not now, many, many years ago, I was able to hand him back to his family and heal his family. And they were able to meet.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And that to me is what honoring my feelings meant.
And now, the other part of honoring your feelings and empowering others is you have a podcast and you've written some books. Can you share some information on that with us?
Absolutely. So the first book I wrote was called How to Get Your Voice Back. And it was really 6 steps that God gave me to journal through during my healing process. And even before, actually, he started some of this work many years before. So he was laying the groundwork of things that I would really need to focus on during my healing process. And so that's my first book, How to Get Your Voice Back. And then my podcast is The Power of Investing in People. And it is really how business and military leaders have hit some sort of obstacle, like all of your guests have, myself, my own story, we've hit an obstacle. And then that propels us in a different trajectory where then our business can actually starts thriving differently rather than what it was before. And that's what happened to me. I started to go through this healing journey because of this relationship that I was in, and started to become a coach. And I started to help other women get their voice back who had been through abusive relationships. And now I'm helping men who have also been abused, which we don't talk about as a society, to help them get their voice back and being able to rebuild their self-worth as well.
And can you share a website of where they can find your information?
Absolutely. You can go to shasparks.com. That's SHASPARKS.com. And you can reach out to me there, or you can reach me on all my social media, which is other links are on that as well.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I want to end this by saying I appreciate your courage to come forward and share your story. And the moment when you realized you were abused and you had to say that word out loud, sharing that part of your story is going to have such an impact on men and women who are listening and going through a similar situation. So I really appreciate you being my guest today.
Well, thank you for providing this amazing platform and for writing your book and for being you and being my friend. So thank you.
Absolutely. Being your friend is easy, I have to say. It's easy. Anyway, Shay, thank you for being my guest on the I Need Blue podcast. This is Jen Lee. Thank you for listening. You can find all of my episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, as well as my website, www.ineedblue.net. And remember, you are stronger than you think. Have a good day.